so big that it feels like everything the light touches is our kingdom. First of all, I would like to remind you to wear your masks at all times while you are staying here. So please don't forget to do that. And turn off your phones, please. And this is the exit, the only one that we have. So for all of you to know, yeah, this is the one. Today is the second day of the IFSS, the International Forestry Student Symposium, for all of you that didn't attend yesterday. And today it's about the environment, or as we say in Spanish, el medio ambiente, or as they say in Mapudungun, Itrofil Moñen. So today you are going to learn about Chilean forests, and you are going to learn about restoration. You are going to learn about wildfires, about forest management, among other things. We are going to have a fair of stands, yeah. And you are going to know some organizations that work in forest-related topics. And we also are going to meditate. And as our final activity today, we have a surprise, and things are about to get dirty. So that's all I can say for now. Yeah. And well, to begin, I will show you this. What? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Is it okay? Like the QR? Yeah. Do you see the code? All right. Yeah, we are going to use Menti for this presentation. So you can scan this code, and if you have some questions during the presentation, you can just submit them, and at the end we are going to reply to some of them. Yeah. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce you to one of my professors here during my days in this university, Andres Plaza. And we are going to have a master conversatory on Chilean forests, about its biodiversity and challenges. So please give him a welcome.
Can I put out my mask? Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to see you all here in this panel of expert discussion. As Constanza said, my name is Andres Plaza. I'm a forestry engineer from the University of Talca, Maule region. It's around 300 kilometers from here, from Santiago. And I'm hold a master in ecology from the University of Bordeaux in France. So I'm just je parle français aussi. See, this I'm French. Great. And I hold a PhD in plant sciences from the University of Cambridge and the United Kingdom. And well, I'm more or less expert of phenology, which is, you know, what phenology is, no? And also I'm working here when I'm back here in Chile. So I'm start to work in forestry production at the department of the forest management. And now I'm just create a new laboratory which is called the climate adaptation and forest management, which is focused on merge the physiological ecology of forest and forest productivity in order to take more informed decisions for forest management and climate adaptation. So, and also now I'm the director of undergraduate studies of the School of Forestry or Forest Engineering at this faculty. So, right, but it's not about me this. So I will present the speakers today. They are Rosita Cherson, who is an associate professor and researcher of the Department of Silviculture and in Silviculture, yes, Silviculture and Conservation. Yep. and she has a PhD in plant biology from the University of California, Davis. And also, her research focuses on the importance of considering evolution in conservation of flora. Um, Also, we have full professor Christian Stades, who is part of the Department of Forest Management, and he also hold a PhD in wildlife ecology from the Wisconsin University the United States as well. And he is expert in ecology and wildlife conservation, and also, yeah, um, he can say more of his expertise. Okay, so I imagine that you are already be here a little while in Santiago, in Chile. I don't know when you arrived here, but um, the idea here now is to speak about the biodiversity of Chile, the different regions that we have, and also about our Chilean forest. So you know that Chile has a 4,000 kilometers long. It's a 400 4,000 kilometers long country with different climate regions from the desert north to the subantarctic Magellanic ecoregion of southern South America, and where we can find an outstanding non-vascular floristic richness of more than 5% of diversity of this non-vascular floristic richness. So that is just a little detail, but I would like to give the word to Rosita for her presentation now. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. Um, Thanks, Constanza. Thanks, Andres, for the presentation. So what I will do today is talk a little bit about our forests, general characteristics of the flora, and what I'd like to do is to focus a little bit on the areas where you will visit during your stay here in Chile. Okay? So first, I'd like to introduce you to a little bit of Chilean biogeography. Um, we live in a country which is an island within a continent, and we call that a biogeographic island. And the reason for that is because we're surrounded by natural barriers. So we have to the north the driest desert in the world, to the south we have Antarctica, to the west we have the Pacific, Ocean, and at the east we have the Andes Mountain. So in in biogeographic terms, we behave like an island. Also, as Andres already said, this country is very long. So latitudinally, what we have is the presence of all biomes that exist in the world. And vegetationally, we have almost all formations, except for the tropical rainforest, which we don't have. And I here enlarged the areas that you will probably see during your stay here in Chile. As a result of the fact that we behave as a biogeographic island, we are an area of high endemism. We have really high endemism in almost all forms of life here in Chile. In fact, we are the country with the most amount of endemic flora genera in, for example, South America, way greater than countries that have more diversity of flora, for example, Brazil or Peru. Okay. Where you're standing right now is World Biodiversity Hotspot. Central and Southern Chile is a World Biodiversity Hotspot for its high diversity in all life forms, endemism, but also because there's a number of threats that we have here. As you probably have already seen, we're a big city. So sitting over a biodiversity hotspot. This area also hosts most of the agricultural land in the country, forest plantations. We have mining activity, the ports, so everything impacting the high biodiversity existing here. Um, a few of the conservation issues that we have in the country have to do, well, a lot of them have to do with the change in land use. So we see here, for example, we have, as I mentioned, agriculture, cattle raising. We have, well, big cities where many people, and also forest plantations and clear cutting. All of those are conservation threats. We are a land of forest fires as well, and climate change has actually increased that. In fact, climate change is predicted to affect most of the country in the next 80 years or so. We see a graph here. It doesn't matter if you don't read the letters over there, but what you can see to the right is that most of the country is expected to increase in temperature, as you can see the sun, going bigger, and decrease precipitation level, except for the far north, in which both parameters are supposed to increase or are predicted to increase, or the south, in which as well both parameters are predicted to increase. So we're facing an era of drought, severe droughts, and which will increase the conservation problems for our flora and fauna and all forms of life. Another problem that we have is that despite the fact that there is a large percentage of an area that is protected by our national system of protected areas, 21%, which is it's considerable, 83% of that area is concentrated in the south of the country. So as you can see, this is a map. To the left is the north, because we're long, divided it. To the right is the south. And you can see that in the central area where the hotspot of biodiversity is, and the north of the country, the presence of protected areas, which are in green here, they are scattered, they are disconnected, and they are very small. Whereas in the south, we have a lot of more protected land. And that is in contradiction to where most of the biodiversity is. So this graph here shows the diversity of vascular flora, which peaks in the central area of Chile, where the percentage of protection, which is here in bars, is the lowest. Okay, having said that, I will just take you through a short walk through the areas that you will probably see where you're going in this trip. This area, the central part of Chile, is characterized by a formation called the sclerophyllous forest, which looks a little bit like the picture on your right. It's a forest formed by trees which are evergreen with small sclerophyllous, which means hard leaves. In the more degraded areas, we have thorny formations, like up on the left, where grazing is more common. And you will see some of the representatives of this forest here on campus. Hope you guys can see that later in the day. When you travel south, about 6 hours south from Chile, you will visit the coastal forests. So the coastal mountain is a very important formation in Chile because it was a refuge during the glacial periods. And many specimens of flora endangered species. This is the ruil, Nothofagus alessandri, which is, I believe, the most endangered tree in Chile. and the forest fire in 2017 destroyed half its population. So you will see and you will visit a park that's actually created just to protect this tree. Another very endangered and beautiful tree that you will see during your trip, hopefully, is a pitao, Pitavia punctata, which is a very close relative of the lemons and oranges. And if you can touch the leaf, you can see that it smells lemony. And another endangered beautiful tree that you will see is keule, Gomortega keule. And I don't know if you will go to national park that protects the keule, but there's also a national park close by that is meant to protect this very endangered tree. In this particular area, we have some very important conservation problems. Forest fires being one of them, and the left just shows a graph of the increase in temperature due to climate change. And also plantations, which were before agricultural land, so land use change has made it very difficult for wildlife to, well, survive in that area. But also, there's a very important problem here of land fragmentation. And I believe Christian will talk a little bit more about that in his talk, the consequences of this fragmentation of the territory due to these plantations and the way they are harvested. Because if we harvest it in a more sustainable way and not by these clear cuts, probably we would give biodiversity a better chance. So I believe you later will travel a little bit further south, where you will see these really beautiful evergreen forests with many nice trees, but also a lot of herbaceous plants that grow here. And two of the genera that are very important in this part of the country are Nothofagus, which is a structural element of many of the forests south of here, sorry, and Araucaria, which only has one species here in Chile, Araucaria araucana. These genera are important because they're very old, and they come from where the whole southern hemisphere was one big continent of Gondwana, and they have this Gondwanan distribution. So they're present here in Argentina, in Australia, New Zealand, New Caledonia, and there's a lot of fossils in Antarctica as well. Most of the Nothofagus trees are evergreen, but you will also, well, now you won't see these colors because it's not fall yet, but you can see some deciduous Nothofagus forests that are very beautiful. And our tree, the Araucaria, which is a natural monument and very important for the Mapuche culture in the south. Okay, I will now show you a few of the plants, very few, like 5, that you might encounter here, starting by this one, which I think is important to note because it gives you skin allergies. It's the family Anacardiaceae, and it has these compounds that can give you allergies, and it's all over the place, so watch out. You can recognize the species very easily because if you look at it towards the light, you see this very bright yellow margin around the leaf. Okay. Also, a plant that's, well, I like very much, the peumo, Cryptocarya alba, which you will see here on campus. And it's a member of the sclerophyllus forest, but carries on towards the south quite a little bit. So you're going to see it in many places. I really hope you can see some orchids. We have very nice terrestrial, not epiphytic, but terrestrial orchids in Chile. And this is the canelo, Rimis winteri, which is a plant that's very important for ceremonial purposes for the Mapuche people as well in the south. Hope it's a sacred tree, so probably, hopefully you'll see it. Some herbaceous plants that you will probably see, sarmienta, for example, and also one I like very much, which is an endemic genus. By highly endemic country or territory with serious conservation problems, such as land use change, which causes fragmentation, forest fires, climate change, and, well, some others. In the area you will visit, all the area you will visit is important because it's endemic and there's a lot of threatened nice species that you will see and hopefully appreciate. And everything, despite the problems of conservation, is very beautiful in the south of Chile, so enjoy. Thank you very much.
Oh, no, this is the last one. Sorry.
That's all.
I'm sorry. That's it.
That's the most efficient talk. Okay, well, welcome everyone to Santiago and Chile, and good morning. I'll be talking a little bit about one of the problems that Rosita mentioned before, which is the interaction of our profession. We are all foresters here, I assume, and we have to acknowledge that forestry is usually considered a rather controversial activity because it cuts the forests. The forests are magical, are pretty, and people don't like that. So we usually face that kind of opposition by community in terms of questioning our objectives and how responsible we are in terms of managing nature. So what we're going to talk about a little bit today is how we can relate biodiversity conservation and forestry in Chile. What are the evidences and what are the problems, and most importantly, what are the challenges for the, I would say, couple of decades ahead from the scientific point of view. In short, Chile has roughly 17 million hectares of forest, of which most of them, fortunately, are native forests, roughly 15 million hectares. And there are a little bit more than 2 million hectares of exotic tree plantations. It's interesting that, I don't know where you guys come from, but I assume several different countries, but in some of your countries, forestry based on native trees may be very important. That's not the case in Chile. In Chile, native forests are rarely managed formally for the production of timber, fiber, and other commercial forest products. Native forests are either not managed at all. Some of them are protected. Some of them are there, but kind of protected or in a rather informal situation. And some of them are exploited for minor products, such as, for example, firewood and others. So does that mean that native forests are in good shape in Chile? Well, Rosita mentioned already that that's not necessarily the case. If we look at some areas in the country, mostly the Central Valley, which is between the Andes and the coastal range, we have two big mountain chains that go from south to north or north to south, whatever. And there is a valley in between, and that's where most of the people live, and most of agriculture is done. So that's the most intensively impacted area of the country. So if you look at some areas there, over the past century, native forests have undergone a severe destruction and fragmentation due to the clearance of many areas in order to provide land for other uses, such as agriculture, for example. And that's a problem that has created a severe threat for many species due to habitat loss and also habitat fragmentation. In many areas, the remnants of native forests are very isolated, and some of them are very small. And you all know that that's a big problem for the persistence of many populations. So that has produced that we have lots of different species of plants and animals that are forest specialists, and at the same time are very threatened. Here I show a few examples, such as the Darwin fox, for example, which is an endemic fox here. I don't know the English name of that pretty red flower, but it's the is it the red? I don't know. It's a red michai or something like that. But the Magellanid woodpecker, the pitao, the Chilean shrew opossum, the Darwin frog, etc. There are several species. Unfortunately, that are either in danger or vulnerable or in those situations. But to be fair, this is not necessarily an effect of forestry, but it's an effect of land use change. I mean, we're not talking about bad forestry practices. We're talking about getting rid of forests and using the land for other purposes. So in this context, then, the challenges for forestry and wildlife conservation or biodiversity conservation in native forests, it's a little limited because we don't have much real forestry going on. So what I'm going to talk now, it's about the other part of the forestry industry in Chile, which is exotic tree plantations. In contrast to native forest, exotic tree plantations are the source of most of the timber and pulp that we produce here in this country, and are therefore an important area in which you can study and manage the effects of this combination of interest, which is preserving biodiversity and also producing goods and services. So that's what I've been doing for almost, or not almost, more than 2 decades already, studying the relationship between pine plantations, which are exotic. We don't have native pines here in Chile, and the conservation of wildlife. And with the idea of finding first what are the ecological relationships, but oriented to coming out with management proposals in order to minimize the negative impacts and maximize the potential beneficial effects of pine plantations on wildlife, because there are some. So you can imagine that in the short time I have, I will not summarize with lots of details what I've been doing over this 20 or more years, but I will basically list a few of the main findings that we have had during these years, which is a way in which I can basically tell you guys what we have observed during all this time. First of all, I would say that one of the most important observations that we have made, and this is not something that we are the only ones that we have observed this, but it's widespread in other places as well, is the crucial role of the understory as a factor that determines whether pine plantations can be or cannot be a good habitat for wildlife. If you have a well-developed, diverse community of plants under the trees, then you can have a very, very well-developed and complex wildlife community. And that depends basically on what the management that you apply to the plantation is. Are you pruning the trees? Are you thinning a lot? Is there a lot of light coming into the ground? Also, we have observed, and we have experimented with this, obviously, that there are some habitat enhancement techniques that can be applied in order to make these plantations a better place for wildlife, such as, for example, using nest boxes to increase the abundance of secondary cavity nesting birds in pine plantations or things like that. We have to acknowledge that timber plantations, I mean, tree plantations are usually a very dynamic type of forest compared to native forest in which trees stay there for centuries. These trees are cut very often. So we have a very rapid succession in which you change the environment from an open area, such as like that one, in which they already planted the trees, to a forest-like type of environment in 20 or 25 years. So there is a succession that it's reflected in a significant change in the wildlife and in the community of plants that you can find over all these years. And this is important to understand, that there is no a single biota associated to these plantations, but it's a changing one. One thing in which we have been studying or doing some of the few studies that have been conducted in the world in this area is the direct impact of timbering operations on wildlife. It is important to understand that when you manage these plantations, it's not only the change of the vegetation structure which affects wildlife, but it's also the operations to change those compositions. So whenever you have lots of machinery getting into the forest for thinning or harvesting or any other operations, you have lots of impacts, not only to the soil, but to wildlife as well. And we have conducted studies that show that many animals are killed, for example, during harvesting operations, because they cannot escape and they basically die crushed underneath a log or a tractor and this is an important thing to understand, because it's a way in which we can explain the population dynamics that take place during these harvest operations. We have also studied the impact of the landscape configuration that arises after management is implemented in an area, and we have found that there are several factors that are deeply important for the quality of productive forest as habitat for wildlife, which is, for example, the sizes of the clear-cut areas, the spatial location of them, the presence of wildlife corridors, for example. And this is an important input for forest planning. So to summarize, what are we going to do in the, for example, next 2 decades? I don't know if 2 decades, but at least 1 decade. We have to study several important topics. The first, for me, is the design of wildlife-friendly operations. We have all these techniques that we need to not necessarily change, but to tune in order to make them more or less damaging for the wildlife. It may, for example, include changing the dates or the seasons in which you intervene, or changing the machinery or the way in which you enter to the forest. And we also have to acknowledge that forest operations are a significant factor for biological invasions. There are lots of ways in which forestry can promote biological invasion, and we have to deal with that. We have to find ways to reduce the introduction of exotic species. For example, because I see some faces that probably reflect that they are not understanding why I am making this connection. But for example, when you build roads and you bring gravel to to put on the road, many times that gravel comes with seeds from exotic species, and then you're spreading them all over the place. Or in some places in which they don't use machinery, and they like to do logging with animals. Well, those animals are fed with some hay that, I mean, comes with weeds, a seed of weeds, and you're spreading them in the forest as well. So there are several reasons why we have to deal with this. There's also the need to work on better ways in which to improve landscape connectivity after forestry operations have taken place. Mostly for less mobile species, we need to assure that they can move around the landscape freely. And finally, this is something that is much more complicated. It's sort of related with the third point, but it entails coming out with solutions to convince different owners in a region to plan together in order to have a landscape scale management plan, and not simply having different owners of their properties doing their own independent planning, because that doesn't work. Animals don't recognize, or plants for that matter, don't recognize the formal property limits, and they move around. And in order to have a better result for this management, we should try to come with a coordinated effort in order to allow this free movement of organisms around the landscape. And I think this is all. Now, thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Rosita, and I'm sorry.
sorry,
Thank you, Rosita and Christian, for your presentations. Now you
So
can.
yeah, thank you, Constanza. Yeah, thank you, Rosita and Christian, for the presentation. Well, now we will make two questions, which is were prepared for the commission for organization here. So the first question is in the actual context of climate change and the transgression of the planetary boundaries, which is the main challenge of the conservation of Chilean biodiversity, and how can human development go forward without collapsing the natural ecosystems? Who wants to start?
Okay. So, so that is the question, right? I mean, that question is. Can you hear me? No. See? Oh. Okay. So we probably should both answer that. I think that one of the main challenges in Chile is climate change. I believe that the constant drought in the country will make it very difficult or challenging for people and biodiversity to, I won't say survive because that's very drastic, but to keep growing properly, because we compete, right? Human needs and nature needs compete for water, which is the vital resource. And in countries where that will be a problem, we will have challenges. So also the other challenge that's worldwide, of course, is population growth. We are many people. We keep growing, and we also need many things, way more than we actually should need. And that, basically sums up. And that also competes with the sustainability with which we can obtain some of those things from nature. So I believe those are the two main challenges. And the second part of the question was, sorry?
How can human development go forward without collapsing the natural ecosystem?
Well, I think we're a bit beyond that. I think we have already collapsed many of the natural systems. That's my view. But we can. I mean, I'm against the eco stress I think we should be positive. We have to be positive about this, because otherwise we'll go, well, get all depressed. And I think that if we learn to live with fewer things and, sorry about this, but reproduce a bit less, maybe we will have a more sustainable way of dealing with our needs and what nature can give us. Also, Christian talked about very interesting things that we can actually do to make production, more sustainable. It's really unreal to think that we can live without what nature provides us, and but to keep harvesting things from nature, what we call ecosystem services, I would rather call them nature's contributions to people, as if this, well, I don't know if you guys know about this, but this paradigm is moving towards from ecosystem services to nature contributions to people, and I prefer that term. It's both ways. So nature contributes to us, we contribute to nature, and I think that part of what Christian said in his talk has to do with that.
Okay, that's a difficult question. I mean, it's an easy question. The answer is difficult. And first, I think I have to be honest. This whole climate change thing kind of puzzles me. I don't know really where to go with it. I mean, it's happening so fast that for me, that I've been working all my life in studying nature. When people say, well, what's going to happen with this system when the temperatures rise, let's say 2 degrees? Well, I don't know what the start point is. I mean, we haven't studied it yet, and you are asking me to say what is going to happen with it in the next 50 years. It's a little overwhelming for me, but it's an important thing. It's happening really fast, and you guys are going to be the ones that are going to be more pressed by these issues. We are doing our part, maybe not as quickly as it would be the ideal, but we're trying to understand the systems. It's going to be your duty to come out with smart ideas in order to slow down the changes and increase the resilience of natural ecosystems to climate change. I wanted to say one thing though, regarding the drought that we're facing here in Chile, and I think it's the case in many places in the world right now. And this is something that for me summarizes some of the disorientation that we have facing this problem, and it's that we foresters are used to plant trees. We cut them, but we plant trees as well. And whenever there is a problem of trees dying, we say, well, we have to go and plant them again and water them. And so we're all conducting this, not all, but there are lots of different restoration projects going around in which, for example, around Santiago, many of the trees that are important in this sclerophyllus forests are dying because of the drought. And even though they are very resistant to drought, they are still dying. So what are people doing? Well, let's go and plant them and bring water and build all these systems to bring up the water into the hills. And I don't know if it makes much sense. Why don't we acknowledge that the changes are here to stay, and let's plant, let's go back into the ecological succession. Don't try to reproduce the ending point, the forest. Let's go and restore the area with shrubs, for example, which are much more resilient, require less water, for example, and prepare the area for better times. I mean, if we are able to restore the climate and bring back the water, maybe that's going to be the case in which we will be able to plant trees again. But don't go and try to blindly recreate a forest that is not going to be sustainable anymore. So I think we have to face this situation and be more reasonable. I think there are lots of good intentions sometimes, but probably we need to rethink some of these strategies again. And regarding the second part of the question, I have no idea. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I support the Rosita's proposal of I don't know, having fewer kids, probably at least two for a couple is the replacement rate. But I don't know, honestly. I've thought about this, but I don't have any ideas. I think trying to be a better person and more responsible, it's the starting point. But I usually don't tend to think that solutions to big problems come from individuals changing. I think that big changes come from individuals, I mean, important individuals that make important or significant changes at the right time, in the right moment. And I'm still looking for those people. I'm not the one.
Great. Thank you very much. I will ask you the next time to put more close. It's not easy to put more close the microphone because probably there's no. Are you hearing okay or no? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good. So we have the second question. This is a third question actually. So nowadays, how does the institutions and the Chilean laws are connected to the biodiversity conservation? The Chilean laws, yeah. And the other question of this second part is, what challenge are and opportunities exist in that matter? So, want to start again?
Okay. Well, regarding the institutions and laws in Chile, I actually wrote a book chapter about this a few years ago with a friend, but trying to make an example out of bird species. I'm a bird expert, so that's why I used it. And the thing is that if you look at different cases of endangered species, you can see how the Chilean conservation system, if you want to put it under that name, it's a failure in the sense that it's not designed to conduct an active conservation, but it's only a passive preventive system. It's, for example, full of laws that say that if you cut that tree, we're going to fine you. You cannot build in that area. You cannot do this. But there is nothing, and no institution that is mandated to, for example, restore an area if that area was destroyed, or to recover the population of an endangered species should that species be in the brink of extinction, for example. There's no one. And because there is no one, there is no fund. There aren't any funds for that. Because when someone, I don't know if there was one person or of many, designed this system, they thought that basically, in order for you to conduct conservation, you have to be a good person, and that's enough. Remember that was my proposal to you guys, but it's not enough. I mean, it's not enough to be a good person. It's not enough not to cut trees. Sometimes bad things happen, and you have to be prepared to take the necessary steps in order to recover those systems. And we don't have those. For example, the Chilean government cannot buy land for conservation. There is no support for. I mean, the Chilean government, as many governments in most countries, can force you to sell them your property, for example, if there is something important there that it's for the good of the people or the common good. So, for example, if they need to build a highway or a bridge or something, you can say, well, this is for the good of the people, so we are forcing you to sell us that property. Well, because our constitution doesn't say that conservation is for the good of the people, they cannot do that. So, for example, I work with endangered birds, and there are places that need to be protected, and they are under private ownership, and there is nothing that you can do unless you get money from a donor, for example. So there are lots of problems. It's a passive system. It's not designed to solve problems that have already taken place. And the other part was, sorry. Okay, well, we have to change that. Definitely.
I don't think I can add more to that, except for the funding.
Say something because what you mentioned is about the new constitution. Actually, what about the new the proposal of the new constitution? Do you think it will change this part? I don't know. You know that.
Yeah, he was saying, but because we have a proposal for a new constitution, we are actually going to the polls in a week or so in order to see whether we accept the new proposal or we don't. I have to say that the new proposal has lots of articles that mention these topics, but in a very vague fashion to me. I mean, it doesn't say explicitly what I'm saying. I mean, for me, it would have sufficed to include a statement in the Constitution that says nature conservation is a matter of public interest. Dot. And that's all. That would have solved everything. Most of the problems that we have had in conservation in the past years would have been solved with that simple phrase. Now we are adding things that are kind of weird, such as nature having rights. I mean, it sounds interesting, but I don't know how we're going to come out with those rights. And well, but I don't want to go in that direction now.
Yeah. No. I think that of course there's lots more on nature conservation than there was before, and in the last constitution also about the right to live in a clean environment, the right to water, some other things. In this country, the water is a private good, which is a very, very weird and unique thing. We own the water here. You can own the water, which is very strange. And it's supposed to change with the new constitution, hopefully.
Great. Thank you very much. So now we'll pass to the people, the audience, which are doing some questions. So I got a lot of questions. Yeah. So the first one is about plantation. Is there evidence of a higher probability of forest fires caused by plantation of exotic species? Yeah. Like such as pinus and eucalyptus. Is there evidence of these species reducing the soil water availability or increasing soil acidity? No, I think, yeah, I probably.
I think plantations may be more prone to forest fires for at least two reasons. Usually one is that they are homogeneous systems that cover significant areas with a very little interference of barriers, for example, for the spread of fires that can be managed, though, with fire breakers, obviously, and the companies do that. It's in their best interest not to have forest fires there. That's a problem. And there is also the fact that some species, I think because of their composition, tend to burn more easily. For example, pines are really good at burning because they have all these resins, but I think eucalyptus trees are even worse than that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are significantly more fire prone than other native species. And this is the same with water. And I'm not an expert on this, but I have read a lot. So I'm telling you guys what I have read and also spoken with some experts in the field, that there isn't necessarily a drying effect of plantations in the ecosystem. In if you take into account productivity, the thing is that, I mean, if you need 1 ton of wood, you have to ask you which system is going to produce that ton of wood with the least drying of the ecosystem. And it turns out that there aren't big differences in between some of the species that have been used for plantations here in Chile and species in the native forest. Usually people, what they do is that they go and measure what the water coming out of the watershed is in different places with different amounts of native forest versus plantations, and they say, well, the native forest produces more water. Okay, but it's growing at a lower pace. So it's a matter of, do you want wood now? Do you want a lot of wood? Okay, that needs water. So, but I don't think there is a big difference between species there. And that's the only thing I can say. Yes. Yeah, that's and again, please take this as a second-hand opinion. It's not my field of expertise. Yes. Oh yeah, yeah. Same. Yeah, I probably, but I'm not sure about that. And again, I don't work in forest fires, but I understand what you are saying, and it's that usually fires start in the lower part of the forest, and then the flames go up, and for that you need a continuity of foliage. So having lots of plants in the understory would probably mean that you could have easier propagation of the fire. But on the other hand, having lots of vegetation also increases the humidity of the system. So I'm not sure what the net effect would be, but that's a good question.
So next question will be for you. How do you believe the new Chilean constitution? Well, that's I already asked something of that. Will protect the natural resources that the country has. And that actually was for you, for Professor Rosita.
Okay. Um, so the new constitution considers things that the old one didn't. So when the old, so we have a constitution here from the 1980s where nobody was talking about climate change, where nobody was talking
come to those automatic cameras in relation to, for example, the distance near to towns or small villages, for example. And there is a clear effect where people live and how many dogs you get in the forest, how many cats. And dogs here in Chile are a huge problem. And they cause a lot of problems, and they are protected and they are sacred. The law in Chile basically can send a forest ranger to jail if he happens to hunt a dog that is killing an endangered animal in a national park. The dog has more legal protection than that year or and that's absurd. I have to say that I'm really unhappy with that system.
Thank you, Christian and Rosita, as well. So I think we are about to get the last question. Said from your experience as members of academia, which platform, academia, private sector, NGOs, etc., do you think is the best for young citizens to make change and fight climate change as possible? Yeah, as less as possible. Yeah. That's what's the question. Well, yeah.
Okay, I think every sector can be used for making a change. I know people from a lot of NGOs that make a big, big difference in biodiversity conservation. I know people in politics that, despite the difficulties that small countries like we do have, I mean, in small countries like Chile, we do have a very little budget and the laws are complex for protecting the environment, but I still see people in politics that, you know, push and have accomplished big things. But also in the private sector, I know people that work in, for example, social responsibility, environmental responsibility for big industries, because I don't think big companies will cease to exist. On the contrary, I think, and so I think that people that work in social responsibility and environmental responsibility for those places make a huge impact. I really do believe that. I have been thinking a lot about this eco-stress problem because I see it in my students and my children. And I think that, so this is a personal opinion. I think there's been some sort of strategy of the large capital. So basically, you know, large, big companies and big people that are billionaires, for example, that impact a lot on the environment, that have made it so we think we are the only responsibles of what's going on. So I need, as a person, to save all the water I can. I need to really be, because if I don't do that, the world is going to end because we have this problem, right? And that means that many people that are impacting more than we can avoid to impact other. So I can save as much water as I can for 70 years of my life, and in one day, one big company can spend all the water that I can save my whole life. That doesn't mean that I don't have to do it. Of course I have to do it. And I have to put pressure. And I think the most important thing for us is, as citizens, as individuals, is social pressure, right? But we have to acknowledge that there are companies that, or people that take private planes to go to work, right? And use more fossil fuels that I can save my whole life taking public transportation. And so what I'm trying to say by this is people that work in private sectors and work towards more sustainable practices of those places really make an impact. So that's what I think. And as citizens, well, in every sector, we can do what we can.
I I'm completely in agreement with Rosita. I think in all these different positions, you can make a difference. As long as you understand that there is a need to always be always to base your decisions on data and not simply opinions. And even though the heart is an important thing when you're talking about the environment, here we are talking as professionals. And I usually think that in many situations, us environmentalists tend to forget that and tend to get too emotional about things. And I think there is a time for being emotional, but there is also a time to being objective. And if you are, you can make a big impact and a difference in any position that you go to.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the answers. So we are started to close this part of the conversation. So one thing is interesting. I just read a paper published in Global Environment Change. It said it's related that what you said, Rosita. Is called a cautionary note about message of hope, focusing on progress in reducing carbon emissions weakens mitigation's motivation. So they say that emotional distress is strongly correlated with mitigation motivation. Hope is not. So hope is not a good motivation for reduce carbon emissions. So it said also is optimistic message about carbon emissions reduce climate change risk perceptions. So less risks leads to the less distress, which is in turn lowers mitigation's motivations. So at the end it said pessimistic climate change message avoid complacency without eroding efficacy. So it's interesting what you say. Probably be more stressed is more useful. So yeah. Well, I will thank again to Rosita and Christian for this conversation. And well, I hope the rest of the day will be interesting for you as well. And just saying we are in a very nice country with a lot of challenge, and we try to do some impact with our research and our I have hope for young people, so mostly in the new generation that are more conscious in what the problem we're facing on. So thank you very much for the organization, and we are closing now this session.
Thank you very much, Christian, Rosita, and Andres, for this amazing presentation. I hope all of you learned at least one thing about Chilean forests today. So now we are going to have our coffee break. It's right outside this place. So after the coffee, we are going to have our workshops. So you will find a list with your names, and well, it will say which workshop you will have to go after, and it's on the left side when you go out. Yeah. So that's it for the coffee. I have to mention that you please take the food according to the type of um, what diet, thank you, that you declared before. So that's it. You will have one glass. Please reuse it. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.